You're standing outside a locked door. Inside you can hear screaming. Not shouts of anger. Not cries for help. The kind of screaming that means something inside a person has broken. It's October 20th, 1496. The door is to the royal bedchamber in Leer, Netherlands. The person screaming is Joanna of Castile, Crown Princess of Spain, Duchess of Burgundy, the most politically important bride in Europe. 16 years old. She's been married for exactly 3 hours. Here's what you need to understand before we go further. The woman history remembers as Joanna the Mad wasn't born mad. Contemporary accounts from her childhood and early adolescence describe an intelligent, educated, emotionally stable young woman. Something happened on her wedding night that destroyed her. The historical record is fragmented. Royal families don't document sexual trauma. But when you piece together testimony from servants, letters from ambassadors, medical reports from physicians, and Joanna's own later statements, a pattern emerges. This wasn't a tragic accident. This was calculated destruction of a human being by someone who understood exactly what he was doing. If you believe that the hidden traumas of historical figures deserve to be remembered and understood, consider liking this video and subscribing. Your support helps uncover the stories that powerful families tried to bury. Let me show you what happened to Joanna of Castile, and why understanding her story changes everything we think we know about female madness in royal history. Joanna was born in 1479, the third child of Isabella I of Castile and Ferdinand II of Aragon. Her parents had united Spain through their marriage. Their children would unite Europe, or that was the plan. From age 5, Joanna was educated in Latin, philosophy, music, and political strategy. Her tutors described her as exceptionally intelligent, perhaps the brightest of Isabella's children. She spoke 4 languages fluently by age 12. She was trained to be a queen. In 1495, when Joanna is 15, her parents arrange her marriage to Philip the Handsome, Duke of Burgundy, son of Maximilian I, Holy Roman Emperor. This alliance would unite Spain with the Habsburgs, creating the most powerful dynasty in European history. Politically perfect, dynastically brilliant. Nobody asked Joanna if she wanted this. In August 1496, Joanna's fleet leaves Spain bound for the Netherlands. The journey takes weeks. She's accompanied by a massive retinue. Ladies-in-waiting, confessors, Spanish nobles, servants. They arrive in Leer on October 18, 1496. Joanna meets Philip for the first time at the pre-wedding reception. Here's what we know from contemporary accounts. Philip was 18 years old, already notorious in the Burgundian court for his sexual appetites. The Venetian ambassador described him as the handsomest prince in Christendom, but noted his character does not match his appearance. French diplomatic reports are more specific. They mention Philip's particular tastes and unnatural interests in bed. One report from 1495 mentions a Burgundian noblewoman who left court after one night with Philip and refused to speak about what happened. But these are diplomatic whispers. Nobody told Joannic whispers. The wedding ceremony takes place on October 20th, 1496. It's magnificent. Hundreds of nobles, music, ceremony, political theater. Joanna is dressed in cloth of gold. She speaks her vows in Latin. According to witnesses, she appears calm, composed, exactly as a princess should appear. Then the ceremony ends, and the bedding ritual begins. You need to understand what this ritual involved. Royal weddings required public verification of consummation. Witnesses would escort the bride and groom to the chamber, watch them get into bed together, then wait outside until the groom emerged with proof of the bride's virginity. Joanna is escorted to the chamber by her Spanish ladies-in-waiting. Philip's Burgundian attendants escort him. According to Spanish sources, Joanna's confessor, Fray Andreas, noted she seemed increasingly distressed as they approached the chamber. The witnesses leave them alone. They lock the door from outside. Standard procedure. Here's where the historical record becomes fragmented. What happened in that room over the next hours isn't directly documented. Royal bedchambers don't have scribes taking notes, but we have the aftermath. And the aftermath tells a story. Approximately 3 hours after the door locks, witnesses hear screaming from inside the chamber. Not just Joanna. Philip is shouting too. According to a letter from one of Joanna's ladies-in-waiting to Isabella of Castile, discovered in the Spanish archives in 1952, they hear crying that did not sound like crying from pain but from something broken in the soul. The door remains locked. At dawn, Philip emerges alone. He's holding a bloodied sheet, the expected proof of virginity. He hands it to the witnesses without speaking and walks away. When servants enter the chamber, they find Joanna curled in a corner of the bed, still naked, unresponsive. According to the same letter, she did not speak, did not acknowledge us, only stared at the wall with eyes that seemed to see nothing. It takes 2 days before Joanna speaks again, and when she does, she only asks one question, over and over. Am the first still Joanna? Think about that question. Not what happened, not why, but am the first still Joanna? Something in that room destroyed her sense of self so completely that she literally questioned her own identity. Her confessor, Fray Andreas, is called to hear her confession. Whatever Joanna tells him, he documents in a report to Isabella of Castile. That report was sealed in Spanish archives and has never been made public. But we know its effect. After reading it, Isabella sends her personal physician, Dr. Soto, to examine Joanna. Dr. Soto's medical report survives. It was discovered in 1978 during renovation of the Cathedral of Toledo. The report describes extensive internal injuries consistent with violent assault and marks upon her body suggesting restraint. Read that again. A royal physician documented violent sexual assault of a crown princess on her wedding night. But here's what makes this systematic rather than tragic accident. This wasn't Philip's first wedding night. He was already married once before, briefly to a French noblewoman. That marriage was annulled after 3 months. French archives contain a sealed petition from her family describing treatment unfit for any Christian woman. Philip had done this before. Over the next weeks, Joanna's behavior becomes increasingly erratic. She refuses to eat unless food is tasted by Spanish servants first. She won't be alone with Philip when required to attend state functions with him. Witnesses describe her as moving like an automaton, speaking when spoken to but with no life in her voice. But here's what's crucial to understand. Despite her trauma, Joanna performs her royal duties perfectly. She attends court functions, meets with nobles, handles diplomatic correspondence. Her letters from this period are articulate and politically sophisticated. She's not mad. She's destroyed. There's a difference. In January 1497, 3 months after the wedding, Joanna becomes pregnant. This should be good news. It's her royal duty to produce heirs. But according to her ladies-in-waiting, Joanna becomes hysterical when she learns she's pregnant. She locks herself in her chambers for 2 days. When she emerges, she seems resigned, defeated. She knows what pregnancy means. More nights with Philip. Throughout the pregnancy, Joanna's behavior fragments further. She becomes obsessively jealous, convinced Philip is having affairs. Historical accounts typically frame this as irrational possessiveness, female hysteria. But look at the evidence. Philip was having affairs, multiple affairs, with Joanna's own ladies-in-waiting, sometimes in rooms adjacent to Joanna's chambers. Her jealousy wasn't madness. It was accurate observation of her husband publicly humiliating her while continuing to assault her privately. In November of 1497, Joanna gives birth to a daughter, Eleanor. The birth is difficult. Dr. Soto's reports mention complications consistent with previous internal injury. After the birth, Joanna experiences what modern medicine would recognize as severe postpartum depression, combined with PTSD. She refuses to eat. She won't let anyone touch the baby except her Spanish nurses. She has violent nightmares and wakes screaming. And through it all, Philip insists on his conjugal rights. If this portrait of systematic destruction disguised as royal marriage is moving you, you might be seeing a pattern historians have been reluctant to name. Let me show you how the machinery of madness was built. Between 1497 and 1504, Joanna has 6 pregnancies in 7 years, 6 children: Eleanor, Charles, Isabella, Ferdinand, Mary, and Catherine. Think about what this means. While suffering from severe trauma, she's kept in an almost constant state of pregnancy by a man who caused that trauma. Each pregnancy requires Philip's presence in her bed. Each time, according to letters from her Spanish attendants, Joanna becomes hysterical beforehand and withdrawn afterward. During this period, Joanna develops the behaviors that would later be cited as proof of her madness. She becomes obsessively possessive of Philip, following him everywhere, refusing to let him out of her sight. Historical accounts describe this as irrational jealousy. But look at the context. Every time Philip is alone with a woman, even briefly, he returns to Joanna's bed that night more violent, more aggressive. Joanna has learned that Philip's affairs escalate his abuse of her. Her jealousy is actually protective hypervigilance, a classic PTSD response. She starts refusing to change clothes or bathe. Historians cite this as evidence of madness, but according to her attendants' letters, this behavior begins after an incident in 1500, when Philip orders her Spanish ladies-in-waiting replaced with Burgundian women. Joanna refuses to undress in front of these new attendants, not trusting anyone loyal to Philip. Her uncleanliness is actually a refusal to be vulnerable around people she correctly identifies as aligned with her abuser. She allegedly attacks one of Philip's mistresses with scissors, cutting off her hair. This incident is always cited as proof of her violent insanity. But read the contemporary accounts carefully. The woman Joanna attacked was one of her former ladies-in-waiting who had testified to Philip about Joanna's unnatural behavior, providing him justification for increasingly harsh treatment. Joanna wasn't randomly violent. She was retaliating against someone who betrayed her to her abuser. Every behavior used to prove her madness makes complete sense as a trauma response to ongoing abuse. In 1504, everything changes. Isabella of Castile dies. Joanna is now Queen of Castile in her own right, one of the most powerful positions in Europe. Suddenly, Joanna isn't just a traumatized wife. She's a traumatized wife with a kingdom. Philip seizes opportunity. He can't rule Castile as a foreign duke. But if Joanna is declared mad, incompetent to rule, he can govern in her name. He begins building the case systematically. He invites nobles to witness Joanna's erratic behavior. He orders physicians to examine her and report any signs of instability. He collects testimony from servants. But here's what makes this especially sinister. He also begins intensifying his abuse, specifically to provoke increasingly dramatic trauma responses that can be witnessed and documented. In 1505, there's an incident that Spanish chronicles describe in detail. Philip brings his current mistress to a state dinner and seats her in Joanna's place of honor. When Joanna objects, Philip has her physically removed from the hall by guards. Later that night, witnesses hear screaming from the royal chambers that lasts for hours. The next day, Joanna appears in public with visible bruises on her arms and neck. Philip announces she fell and that her fragile mental state makes her prone to accidents. He's manufacturing evidence of madness while actively driving her toward breakdown. In September 1506, Philip dies suddenly at age 28. The official cause is typhoid fever. Some historians suspect poison, though this has never been proven. Joanna's reaction to his death is what cements her reputation as Joanna the Mad for the next 500 years. She refuses to allow Philip's body to be buried. She keeps his coffin with her, traveling with it from place to place. According to witnesses, she talks to the coffin, has it opened repeatedly to look at his decaying body, refuses to be separated from it. This behavior is held up as the ultimate proof of her insanity. A mad queen in love with a corpse. But look closer at the context. Joanna knows that once Philip is buried, her father Ferdinand will claim regency of Castile, declaring her incompetent. As long as Philip's body remains unburied, she's technically still queen consort with certain legal protections. She's not mad. She's using the only strategy available to her to maintain some political agency. And the talking to the coffin? The opening it repeatedly? According to her confessor's records, Joanna tells him she needs to verify Philip is really dead, that he can't hurt her anymore. She's checking the body to confirm her abuser is actually gone. It's not love. It's trauma verification. But Ferdinand doesn't see it that way. In 1509, he has Joanna declared incompetent to rule. She's confined to the royal convent of Tordesillas. She will spend the next 46 years there, imprisoned, alone. Here's what happens at Tordesillas. Joanna is isolated from her children. Her son Charles becomes Holy Roman Emperor, one of the most powerful rulers in history, but visits his mother only twice in 46 years. She's confined to a small suite of rooms. She's allowed no visitors except her confessors and guards. Her letters are intercepted and destroyed. According to reports from her guards, later discovered in Spanish archives, Joanna's behavior at Tordesillas fluctuates dramatically. She has periods of complete lucidity where she discusses politics, philosophy, and theology with sophistication. Then, she has episodes of complete breakdown, days where she doesn't speak, doesn't eat, just sits staring at nothing. Modern psychologists who've studied the records identify this pattern clearly. It's complex PTSD with periodic dissociative episodes, consistent with prolonged severe trauma. But 16th century medicine doesn't have that framework. They just see a mad woman who sometimes seems sane. In 1520, during the Castilian revolt against Charles V, rebels break into Tordesillas and liberate Joanna, proclaiming her the rightful queen. They bring her documents to sign, decisions to make, and for several months Joanna governs. She makes coherent political decisions. She corresponds with rebel leaders. Contemporary accounts describe her as entirely rational during this period. Then Charles's forces retake Tordesillas. Joanna is imprisoned again. Charles declares that the rebels manipulated a sick woman and that Joanna's brief period of lucidity was actually cunning on the part of the rebels. She's locked away more securely. Now she's not just mad. She's dangerous. Here's what haunts me about this part of the story. When given political agency and purpose, Joanna functioned competently. When isolated and powerless, she displayed symptoms of severe mental illness. This suggests her madness wasn't a fixed mental condition. It was a trauma response that intensified with isolation and eased with purpose and agency. But nobody in 1520 understood trauma that way. They just saw a mad queen who needed to stay locked up. Joanna dies on April 12, 1555. She's 75 years old. She's been confined for 46 years, nearly 2/3 of her life. In her final days, according to her confessor, she speaks clearly and calmly. She dictates a will. She requests to be buried next to her mother Isabella, not next to Philip. She dies lucid, requesting separation from her abuser even in death. So here's what we actually know about Joanna the Mad. She was an intelligent, educated princess who suffered severe sexual trauma on her wedding night. That trauma was documented by physicians and reported to her mother. She was then subjected to ongoing abuse while kept in constant pregnancy for 7 years. She developed PTSD symptoms that were interpreted as madness. Those symptoms were used by her husband to justify intensified abuse, designed to provoke more dramatic responses that could be witnessed and documented. After her husband's death, she used the only strategy available to her to maintain political agency, keeping his body unburied. This was interpreted as insane necrophilia. She was imprisoned for 46 years, during which her trauma symptoms fluctuated with her level of agency and purpose. When given political responsibility, she functioned capably. When isolated, she displayed severe symptoms. She died requesting to be buried away from the man who destroyed her. Here's what should disturb you about this story. Everything used to prove Joanna was mad actually proves she was traumatized. Every irrational behavior makes perfect sense when understood as a response to documented abuse. But for 500 years, history remembered her as Joanna the Mad. Not Joanna the Traumatized. Not Joanna the Abused. Mad Joanna the Abused. Because acknowledging what actually happened to her would have required acknowledging that royal marriages could be sites of systematic torture. That dynasty building could destroy the women who made it possible. That fathers and sons could imprison a queen for 46 years to maintain political power. It was easier to call her mad. Think about how many other mad women in history were actually traumatized women whose symptoms were misinterpreted as mental illness. How many hysterical queens were actually abuse victims? How many women imprisoned in convents or asylums for madness were actually suffering from what we now recognize as PTSD? The historical record is full of mad women. Once you start looking for the pattern of trauma instead of the diagnosis of madness, different stories emerge. Joanna of Castile wasn't mad. She was systematically destroyed by a man who understood exactly what he was doing, then imprisoned by her father and son to maintain their political power. And history's response was to blame her broken mind instead of the people who broke it. Here's the question that should keep you awake tonight. How many women are currently diagnosed as mentally ill when they're actually suffering from documented trauma? How many times do we still call women crazy when they display symptoms of abuse? The machinery that called Joanna mad instead of traumatized is still running. It's evolved. It's medicalized. But it's still functioning. 500 years later, women with trauma histories are still more likely to be diagnosed with mental illness than to have their trauma recognized and treated as such. Still more likely to be called difficult, irrational, unstable than to be seen as people rationally responding to intolerable circumstances. That's what makes this story more than historical tragedy. It's a 500-year-old mirror showing us machinery we're still operating. If this exposed something you've never heard before, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because we're going to keep uncovering the stories they buried under diagnosis of madness. Drop a comment with other mad historical figures you think deserve re-examination, and I'll see you in the next investigation.